I'm Emmie Vida. I'm a mother, a wife, a grandmother, and I hope to be a great-grandmother soon. I'm looking back upon 7 decades of my life. I'm a mixture of Eastern European Orthodox Jewish background, born and raised in a German Jewish and Christian environment. One of 7 children of a middle-class family, I followed a firmly established pattern. After 4 years in a Jewish elementary school, I entered the city's high school for higher education, where I was the only Jew in the upper grades. I attended the university for 1 year and married at the average age of 21. So far, my life was normal, predictable. Then I did the unpredictable. I married a rabbi whose congregation was in Czechoslovakia, more than 1,000 miles away from my family. I was a stranger in a strange town. Yet we were quickly accepted in a friendly community, and again I followed the normal pattern. I had 2 children, a girl and a boy. Life was comfortable and pleasant. Almost overnight, everything changed dramatically. We were uprooted. We became homeless, fleeing for our lives before the murdering Nazis. After many months of aimless wanderings, we reached the safe haven of America. Here, after initial hardship and problems, our life again has become normal and serene. I feel truly blessed. This then is my story, from the remembered past to the living present, into the hope for the future. Why do I make this tape? I make it for all of my family, my friends, to stay in touch with them, and for them to say when they see this tape, oh, this is Emmie as I remembered her, and may I be remembered for good. These are my parents, already in Germany, as you see, well established. And my mother was pregnant, but you cannot see it in this picture. And this was a picture to send home to the people in Poland to show that they had arrived in Germany. They were doing so well. My grandmother's name was Pick, and he wrote that she came from Lodz, near Lodz, and it struck me the familiarity of Pick and the name. I wrote to him, and I got the most wonderful letter. He said, as long as it's Pick, we are related. And it turned out, I have an old cousin here in San Francisco. And then she mentioned, yes, there was a family Greenfield. They were to do. He came, this David Greenfield came to America 1852. And he started out like all the others, peddling. And then he opened a shop in Atlanta, it became a store, and he became a well-to-do man. And he remembered, of course, his family in Poland, and he sent them money every year to maintain them. And he brought over his nephew. And this nephew was my father's father, my grandfather. Isn't that something? Yeah, it's remarkable. So I was in Mobile, Alabama last year. I wrote my sister, and she said, you know, there is one from that family. And I met one of the remaining 5 grandchildren of this fabulous David Greenfield. I sometimes tease my grandchildren. I say, you know, after all, you are really Southerners, and you go back so many generations. Your great-great-great-grandfather fought in the Confederacy. He had even 2 slaves. And it is really very funny. Picture. I mean typical because we all were prepared. We were told what to wear, and we were also told to look straight into the camera Don't move a muscle, don't look to the side, and be very serious. Preceding such a photo session was always a rather hot debate. Who would sit next to whom? And then finally, when a certain agreement had been reached, it was determined that the taller ones would be in the back and the smaller ones would be in the front. For some reason, my mother ended up in the back. She wasn't tall, but I have a feeling that my father probably insisted, as the father of the family, he had to be where he could be seen best. And he was surrounded by the two younger boys. Now I shall start from the left and quickly give you a story what happened to them. This is my brother Max. He was responsible for me meeting my husband, George, because it was my brother Max whom I visited during the school vacation and at rabbinical seminary. And George, my husband, was his best friend. And these two young men decided to go on a ski vacation, and of course I went along. Next to Max, there is a sad ending to my brother Max's life. He was killed in front of his apartment in Washington Heights in New York City. He was a rabbi there. He had established a very large congregation of German Jews, mainly from Frankfurt and the middle of Germany. It was a Orthodox congregation, and he did a great deal for these people who had come, some of them already established in years, but not established in profession. They all had to start from scratch. And he was there, he handled their difficulties, he did a great deal for them. He came home one evening after the service into this large apartment house in which at one time 4 of our family members had lived. I lived there too at one time. And he entered the lobby. It was very stormy outside. There was nobody there. He opened the door and there was a stairway in back of the door, and 3 men jumped him. My brother Max was an athlete. He was a terrific swimmer, and he could fight off first one, the second one, but the third one had a gun, and as he had already opened the door, he fell into the apartment door and was killed immediately. My sister-in-law it was one of these typical New York apartments with a long railroad hall. She had come back from work. She was very tired, and she didn't hear him. He couldn't even cry out. Nobody had come in or out of that lobby within these 5 minutes. But then they robbed him, and when they were running out, somebody came from the outside, saw them running out, and then of course they found him. It was written, it was made the papers in a sensational way. We were called from Berkeley and left immediately. George was asked to officiate at the funeral, of course, and when we entered that street, there was a gathering of the Jewish Agenda, no, the Jewish Defense League, and they wanted to make political deal out of it. And George said it had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. This was a robbery. And I do not want to add to all this. I'm not going to give out a statement. And so my brother Max was buried with all the honors that he deserved. It was a great shock to all of us. And we were glad my parents, by that time, had passed away. My parents had been married 60 years. Next, I come back to the family picture. Next to my brother Max is my brother Michael. Michael is the one whom we owe a great deal. we as a family for a great deal. Michael was the one who moved heaven and earth to bring us over. We faced a special problem. I was a German citizen. I mean, I was born in Germany. I could come in on the German quota, which was very good at that time. George was born in Hungary, and the Hungarian quota was miserable. It had been closed, and the waiting time would have been 5 to 10 years. There was only one way of avoiding this, and that was if he would come in on a special quota. That is, my parents would secure a congregation for him that would hire him as a rabbi, so he would not become a public burden. My parents had friends, the owner of a well-known cemetery, Cedar Park, out in New Jersey. And these friends had friends in Brooklyn. They had a little yeshiva shul there. They met there, and they said, all right, we will hire him. My parents would put the money down, and in a special bank book, so that the salary would be paid through this bank book, but officially through the congregation. All seemed to be well. There is a story, but I do not want to go into this. We were located, we were already not in Prague anymore. All seemed to be well, but then an investigator from the immigration office went to this supposedly shul. There was no shul, there was just a gathering. People would come there in the evening to daven. He said no, that could not be done. So here we were. And then my brother, Michael, went to Washington, and he took the pictures of our two small children. And he went to, I think at that time it was Lehman, Governor Lehman or Senator Lehman, and he said, now look at these two pictures. We will take care of them financially, but don't you have a heart to save their lives? You know what's going on. So then we received word, after we had been refused the visa, we received word that the visa had arrived. We were supposed to come and claim it. But we made it, as I said, there was a story, they couldn't reach us because we had already left Prague. Anyway, it was Michael whom we really owe our lives. Michael was a doer, and unfortunately, he was also a great smoker, and he lived fast. Married, had a child, and he died at a fairly young age of 60 due to a heart attack. Next to Michael is my mother. My mother, the driving force of the family. My mother was, as my father liked to call her, General Hindenburg, because she made things happen. My mother was the one who realized that education had been denied to her. She wanted her children to have all the education there was and a way to build a better life. Next, and she lived a ripe old age together with my father in New York City. They had been married for 62 years. Next to my mother, it's Emmie, that's me, of course. And there isn't that much to be said about me. I do a great deal of talking anyway. Then we go back to the left, my sister Paula. My sister Paula has a heart of gold. Also, she cannot make decisions. As you see our very becoming hairdo, that was a typical hairdo, you know, you cut your hair and you have the bangs like this. It just happened at that time to become fashionable. So I had my hair cut, and my sister, who had a very nice little bun there in the back, also decided, yes, she should have her hair cut. As soon as she sat there, the barber It wasn't a woman, it was the barber, and he cut half of it. He said, wait a minute, wait, I think I changed my mind. He said, you cannot change your mind anymore. You cannot go around like this. I make a proposition, I'll cut the other half, and then you let it go in again. But of course that was the final decision to be made. Next to my sister Paula is my youngest brother, Leo. Leo was the unexpected child. Leo came as a complete surprise to my parents and to us. There is a difference in age of 19 years between my older sister and my brother Leo. At that time, people, when they had already 6 children, and they were already close to 40, or maybe my mother was 42, it wasn't a thing to do. You didn't have any more children. Well, anyway, Leo came along. He was adorable. He was a toy to all of us, a plaything. Everybody tried to raise Leo. Leo, then when he was a year old, was afflicted with polio. It was at a time when polio was rampant in Germany and I believe in America too. Fortunately, it only affected one arm, and with therapy and later on by being a strong athlete, he overcame all that. He is a terrific tennis player. Leo is married and has 3 daughters who are married and a son. And he's doing very well. By the way, my sister Paula married, and also when we were in America, and she has a son. She's a widow, but she has a son who still lives with her. Then is my father. As you see, my father with his hair all dark yet. He felt a bit embarrassed about that because he said, how come I don't have any gray hair? Worries he had enough, but gray hair he didn't. And my father was a very pious man. He would go to services in the morning, in the evening, to his son's congregation, which was nearby, and never missed any opportunity to stand up and say Kaddish. And when we later on asked him, but Papa, you cannot have so many people to say Kaddish after Yortzeit. He said, no, but I say Kaddish after all those who did not leave anybody to say Kaddish for. And I thought that was a very moving statement. He had a beautiful voice. He would open the doors on a Shabbat in his apartment building and make Kiddush. And he made it in a voice that everybody in this house heard him. And they knew it was Shabbat. Mr. Couple made Kiddush. Joseph. Joseph is the brother who in age follows me. And he studied to be an engineer. He could not complete his education. He had to leave on account of Germany. He also, when it was impossible for him in Germany, he went to Prague to finish there. But then the German university in Prague, a German university, was closed to Jews, and so he had to leave too. He lives in New York, is married, and has a married son who gave him a grandchild, very sweet little girl. And Carola. Carola is my youngest sister. Carola is the one who lives in Mobile, Alabama. Carola is a widow. She also lost her husband fairly young. He was 63 or 64. She's a very intelligent, bright person, and has gone on with her life. She loves her grandchildren. She loves her children. As a matter of fact, she helped raise one of her grandchildren because the mother had to has a profession. Carola lives in Mobile, Alabama with her son, and that's it. We have them all. This probably was when I entered, after I got out of the elementary school, Jewish elementary school, and this must have been one of the first classes in high school, when I entered high school. As you see, I'm taller than all the rest of them, and I was here on a school picnic. We went on a school picnic, and this is the picture taken of the school picnic. During the summertime, we spent weeks in the country. Now, right after the First World War, we, from the school, we organized trips that we went into the country. First of all, for the good air, and secondly, for the good food. We had good butter, and we got eggs and all that sort of thing. Later on, we then went on vacations with my parents, and one of the favorite spots that we went to, because it wasn't too too far from my hometown, was Bad Ems. I think I was 15 or 16 at that time, and as you see, I was all decked out with my fur piece. It couldn't have been too cold. Everybody else was just in a dress, but I had to show off I had a fur piece. I was the one who was the first one to sort of get out of the mold. You see, we were one of the few Eastern European families. Maybe there were 3 or 4 in this German town. And the German Jews were very German Jews, very much so. At home, my parents, of course, spoke Yiddish, but they made it a point that when we were on the street, or when they were on the street, they would speak German. It was never really high German, but it was German. And I was the one who was given a lot of opportunities. First of all, by the time I came around, my 2 brothers were already in high school. My older sister had been in high school and she graduated, but she did not go on to the university because she sort of had to help raise the rest of the children. And so, as I said, the opportunities were given to me, more or less, and to my sister Carola after me. And when I look back at it, yes, I was the type to look for adventure. I was the type who would welcome the idea to go on a canoe trip or do the things that were not really the proper thing to do, but they were always proper. You see what I mean? I was always chaperoned. When I went on a canoe trip, my brother was there. When I went to on that trip to visit my brother was there. And when I went to university, I went to the same university that my brother went, because a girl, you wouldn't send her out somewhere and you didn't have a university in town. So yes, that in a certain way, I sort of had this feeling I wanted to explore. Now, yes, meeting George started out as a simple visit and an opportunity to get away from home and an opportunity to go on a ski trip. There was no snow to speak of where I lived, and there was no skiing where I lived. People didn't go skiing, just like here. To go skiing, you went to Switzerland or to go to these certain places in the Alps, Bavarian Alps, Swiss Alps. So my brother attended the rabbinical seminary in Breslau. Now Breslau is a town which is very close to the mountains of Silesia. There were famous ski resort places. And when I came to Breslau after a lengthy train trip, it was rather far from where I lived, as I said, I had to be outfitted for skiing. And so I went with my father, to one of these textile factories who made men's clothes. Women did not wear pants. You froze your legs off, but you did not wear pants. So in the presence of men who couldn't believe their eyes. I was fitted in the waist and in the hips. Well, further they didn't dare to go, but the length of the pants. And I bought a white turtleneck sweater and this cap and I believe a jacket that I could buy in a department store. Well, I arrived and I came to the seminary first, and there were these 12 supposedly very serious, religiously thinking young men. And here come I like a breath of fresh air. And the only girl, we ate at the same place, and everybody tried to get my attention. I felt good about that. I ate it up, I must admit. And then my brother had arranged for the ski trip, and we left and spent, I believe, a week there. On the train ride to this place where I had first met George in this gathering of 12, on this train ride, George tried to tell me in his halting German an American story by the American writer Dreyer. What's his name? Not Dreyer, but you will know. Anyway, it was one of these stories that went all through the world, and especially in Germany. It was a gripping story, the tragedy, an American tragedy, where I think a young boy gets a girl pregnant, and then he wants to marry the rich girl. What is he going to do with? Anyway, George tried to tell me this story. It took forever. And I'm a bit impatient when it comes to this. Well, anyway, we made it. We got to the place, and it was the end of the story too. I don't know if we got to the end, doesn't matter. We had some wonderful days there. We did some skiing, and really enjoyed. It was a new experience for me altogether. And of course we had the time to get acquainted with each other. I was 17 and a half years old. George is 3 years older. Then it was the time of New Year's, and these two young men went out for New Year's Eve, and they left me at home because it wasn't the right thing to take a girl out in this atmosphere. But due to the fact that both of these young men were short in funds, they returned back early to a very, say, upset sister who didn't like the idea that she had been left out of all this. That's how we met, and from there on a correspondence developed. We saw each other maybe twice a year. That's about all. George was the letter writer, and I wasn't so anxious to write back. But George managed to meet us when my parents and I went on summer vacations. So we met, and on one of these summer vacations, George proposed. And then, before he did, of course, he had come to meet my parents. And I remember he came Erev Pesach. Now, Erev Pesach in my parents' house was not a very good time to visit. Everything was sort of in an uproar there. My mother was very sore when it came to Pesach cleaning. Anyway, there was a young man, and as I said, there were 3 girls, so my parents were delighted. And we spent the Pesach week together, and after that we met in these different summer vacations, and one semester we spent together. Then we got engaged, and shortly after 3 or 4 months of being engaged, we married. For our life, it was nothing unusual. You could have copies of this life all around you, all around you. The, let's say, the unusual part and the unpredictable part started with the area of Hitler. Families were torn apart, families were uprooted, families had to face momentary decisions, something that we had not been trained or educated to do. We had time to make all these plans. When you went on a vacation, you knew already what time and when you were going to do it. When you had children, you knew how to prepare for their future. There was nothing unusual. I mean, it went as like a little brook, softly, gently. And then it is as if you have a group of birds sitting there and just sort of looking for something to eat here or there or near the water, and somebody takes a rock and throws it, and everybody just spreads out and disappears in all directions. And that was the thing that happened to many of these places, especially in Czechoslovakia. In Poland, more or less, people had this advance, not the knowledge of the ultimate fate, but they knew what to expect. In Czechoslovakia, we had been misled. We had been told that England would maintain their agreement. England wanted to make a peace for our time, but we at that time, before Chamberlain made this statement, were of the opinion that the Sudetenland was part of Czechoslovakia, and this English peace agreement, or let's say the agreement to help Czechoslovakia, took in the Sudetenland too. It didn't occur to us that we would be sort of cut off and given as an appeasement. So we were caught by surprise, total surprise. And not only the Sudetenland, also the other parts of Czechoslovakia, which had been added to what had become Czechoslovakia, and had never been a state by itself, partly Austria, partly Hungary, and partly Germany. So here we were, and caught by utter surprise. There's one question here: what do you take along? That's something that bothers me to this day. What do you take along? What is so important? You save yourself, of course, but then you think of all the things that you leave. There is no order in your thinking because you go from step to step. You cannot make these long-range plans. You live. My husband always says, my family says, I'm a bit of a romanticist. Maybe I am.